Moments before tragedy, passenger Dave Halley snapped a photo of his wife Kim and their 4-year-old daughter Megan, smiling from their seats on Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, unaware it would be their final picture. Minutes after takeoff, the plane was struck by a Russian missile at 33,000 feet, exploding mid-air and scattering wreckage and bodies across miles of Ukrainian farmland. Every one of the 298 passengers and crew was killed instantly. Some of their belongings and passports later found among the debris of what investigators called one of the most awful war crimes in aviation history. Yet Russia continues to deny involvement to this day, still refusing to extradite those responsible or pay any reparations for the awful tragedy. A Colorado man named Dwayne Johnson developed a rare and irreversible lung condition known as popcorn lung after years of eating and inhaling the buttery fumes from multiple bags of microwave popcorn every day. The artificial butter flavoring contained diacetyl, a toxic chemical that can scar and destroy airways over time. In 2012, a jury awarded him $7.2 million after ruling that the popcorn maker failed to warn consumers of the dangers. Doctors said his lungs had deteriorated so badly that they resembled those of an industrial worker exposed to chemical vapors for years, all because of his daily snack habit. On June 18, 2011, Amy Winehouse took the stage in Belgrade for what would become her final major performance and one of the most painful nights of her career. She stumbled through songs, slurred her words, and forgot entire lyrics as the crowd began to boo. Serbian media called it a national embarrassment, and even government officials described the show as a disgrace. Within days, the rest of her European tour was canceled so she could recover, but she never did. Just over a month later, on July 23, 2011, Amy was found dead in her London home from alcohol poisoning at the young age of 27. Elsa Koch, wife of Buchenwald commandant Karl Otto Koch, became infamous for her sadism towards prisoners during the Holocaust. Survivors claimed she ordered beatings, stole from inmates, and selected those with distinctive tattoos to be killed so their skin could be turned into lampshades, book covers, and gloves. Nicknamed the Bitch of Buchenwald, she was convicted of war crimes, sentenced to life in prison, and died of suicide in 1967. Her name forever tied to some of the most grotesque atrocities of the Nazi regime. At his 2011 Halloween party, Neil Patrick Harris served a cake designed to look like the rotting corpse of Amy Winehouse, complete with a mangled face, matted hair, blood-red frosting, a cigarette hanging from its mouth, and a tag reading, "The Corpse of Amy Winehouse." The photo resurfaced years later and drew massive backlash, especially since Winehouse had died from alcohol poisoning just 3 months before the party. Harris later apologized, calling it a regrettable choice. Many animal shelters refuse to let black cats be adopted around Halloween time, fearing they'll be tortured, sacrificed, or used as props in satanic rituals. Legendary illusionist Harry Houdini died on Halloween night in 1926 after his appendix burst, reportedly triggered when a fan punched him to test his strength. Before his death, he promised his wife he'd try to contact her from beyond the grave every Halloween, sparking seances that still continue to this day. In 1990, 32-year-old magician Joe Burris tried to outdo Houdini by being buried alive in a plexiglass coffin under 7 tons of dirt and cement, but the coffin collapsed instantly, crushing him to death on Halloween night, just like his idol. Statistically, Halloween is the deadliest day of the year for child pedestrians by far. Kids are 3 times more likely to be hit by a car while trick-or-treating than any other day of the year. 8-year-old Timothy Bryan died on Halloween night in 1974 after eating cyanide-laced candy given to him by his own father, who hoped to cash in on his life insurance policy. The Candyman case sparked the nationwide panic about poisoned Halloween candy, but it was the only true case of it happening ever recorded. In dozens of states, registered sex offenders are required by law to keep their porch lights off, avoid Halloween decorations, and have no contact with children on Halloween. Some cities even enforce curfews and random compliance checks on Halloween night. On an October night in 1997, students at Cornell University woke up to find a pumpkin impaled on the tip of the 173-foot spire of McGraw Tower. No one saw it placed there, no ropes, cranes, or ladders were ever found, and no one took credit. The pumpkin stayed perched for months, slowly rotting through the winter before being removed in March, an incredible Halloween mystery that remains unsolved to this day. In 2015, doctors were baffled when a healthy 5-year-old boy's sodium levels skyrocketed inside a New York hospital, setting off a mystery that would expose a horror no one saw coming. For years, 26-year-old Lacey Spears told friends and followers that her son Garnett was chronically ill, documenting his mysterious sickness online to garner sympathy. But when the 5-year-old was hospitalized in New York, doctors found his sodium levels had mysteriously spiked to near-fatal levels, 182 milliequivalents per liter, so abnormally high that staff initially thought it was a lab error. Surveillance footage later showed Lacey taking her son into a private room and secretly administering large amounts of salt through his feeding tube. Hours later, Garnett suffered massive brain swelling and passed away. Investigators later found feeding bags in her apartment coated with salt residue, along with Google searches for dangers of high sodium in children. Spears was eventually sentenced to 20 years to life in prison, her case becoming a chilling example of Munchausen syndrome by proxy taken to the extreme. As a teenager, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's family was struggling so badly that they were evicted from their apartment in Hawaii. Not long afterwards, Johnson witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His mother stepped out of her car on a busy highway and began walking towards oncoming traffic. Luckily, Dwayne sprinted after her and pulled her back just before she was hit. Years later, he revealed that the incident was a suicide attempt brought on by their dire situation, saying he never forgot how powerless he felt in that moment. In 2008, 39-year-old Stefan Miller was helping his cousin, Hollywood animal trainer Randy Miller, film a promo video with their 700-pound grizzly bear named Rocky, the same bear that starred alongside Will Ferrell in Semi-Pro that same year. But in an instant, the trained bear turned deadly. Without warning, Rocky suddenly lunged and bit deep into Stefan's neck, crushing his spine and severing an artery. He bled out within minutes as horrified crew members looked on. The bear, raised in captivity and for years considered to be safe, proved that even the most well-trained predator can revert back to its instincts in a heartbeat. This was the moment a couple of Christian extremists realized their lives were over, as courtroom footage shows Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari standing at their arraignment after their 10-month-old daughter Mary died from severe malnutrition and dehydration caused by prolonged neglect. Prosecutors revealed the infant weighed just 8 pounds at the time of her death and showed signs of extreme starvation after being deprived of adequate food, water, and medical care for weeks. The medical examiner ruled her death entirely preventable, ruling she died from starvation rather than illness. The parents later claimed extreme isolated religious beliefs led them to reject modern medical care and even attempted to use those beliefs as a defense in court. In 2019, Seth Welch was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree felony murder, while his wife Tatiana also received life in prison but with the possibility of parole. The judge said their actions showed an utter disregard for human life, ruling that religious belief does not excuse starving a child to death. In February of 2022, 25-year-old Taylor Shabiznis killed her boyfriend in one of Wisconsin's most horrific crimes in modern history. During sex in the basement of his mother's home, she strangled 24-year-old Shad Therian to death after a night of heavy drug use. But what she did next was beyond comprehension. She continued to violate his body for hours, then used knives and a chainsaw to slice him apart, deliberately placing his severed head in a bucket and leaving it in plain view for his mother to find the next morning. When the woman went downstairs, she came face to face with the unimaginable, her son's head staring back at her from inside a blood-filled bucket. Shabiznis later told police they'd have fun trying to find the rest of him. And her violent behavior didn't end there. During a 2023 court hearing, she suddenly lunged at her own attorney, knocking him to the ground before being restrained by deputies. Shabiznis was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the height of her Disney fame, Ashley Tisdale was battling serious health and mental struggles. Since childhood, she had suffered from severe anxiety and panic attacks, and during her High School Musical years, they became so intense that she was repeatedly rushed to hospitals believing she was having heart attacks until doctors realized it was panic. The stress left her barely eating and constantly exhausted. In 2007, at 21 years old, months of unexplained pain led doctors to discover a tumor in her breast that required surgery, later confirmed to be benign. Years later, she revealed she developed alopecia, causing patches of her hair to fall out from stress and autoimmune issues, saying the pressure to appear fine through the years came at a real cost to her health. In January of 2026 in Pennsylvania, 11-year-old Clayton Dietz fatally shot his adoptive father, Douglas Dietz, on the night of the boy's own birthday after his Nintendo Switch was taken away from him. Police say the child waited until his father fell asleep on the couch, found the key to his gun safe, loaded a handgun, and shot him once in the head. The boy later admitted he did it out of anger over losing his game console. Douglas Dietz died at the scene, while prosecutors charged the boy with criminal homicide and moved to try him as an adult, calling the case one of the most disturbing juvenile killings in recent years. On Halloween morning in 2025, former TV news anchor Angie Mock was arrested in Wichita, Kansas, after allegedly stabbing her 80-year-old mother Anita to death inside their home. When police arrived, Mock was reportedly covered in blood with cuts all over her hands, while her mother was found deceased in bed with multiple stab wounds. Dispatch audio captured Mock claiming she stabbed her mother to save herself, though no evidence has yet explained what that meant. The once trusted newswoman, who had anchored for Fox 2 St. Louis, is now charged with first-degree murder and held on a $1 million bond. In 1998, Thai pop star Ruangsak Loichasak boarded Thai Airways Flight 261 and took seat 11A. Moments later, the plane crashed, killing 101 people on board, but Ruangsak miraculously survived, earning himself the nickname Iron Bones. Nearly 27 years later, history repeated itself when an Air India flight went down in 2025, and once again, the sole survivor was seated in 11A. Ever since, that seat number has become one of the fastest to sell out, since customers believe it will give them a higher chance of survival if the plane happens to crash. Here's a photo of American soldier Joseph Dwyer carrying a wounded Iraqi boy away from crossfire during the Iraq War in 2003, an image that became a symbol of compassion amid chaos. After returning home, Dwyer was diagnosed with severe PTSD, became unemployed, and suffered a marital breakdown as his mental health deteriorated into paranoia and violent delusions. In 2008, after years of psychological struggle and substance abuse, Joseph Dwyer died from a drug overdose, a quiet end to a life permanently altered by the horrors of war. In 2025, 15-year-old woodworking apprentice Muhammad Kendirsi died after coworkers assaulted him with a high-pressure air hose during what they reportedly called a workplace prank. The force of the compressed air caused massive internal damage, including rupturing of his intestines and severe internal bleeding. Doctors said the sudden air pressure led to rapid organ failure and shock, and despite emergency treatment, his injuries were too extensive for him to be saved. Authorities treated the incident as a violent assault, and the case sparked massive outrage over deadly hazing and abuse in the workplace. In July of 2025, 43-year-old Clinton Brink and his wife Kristen were hiking with their two young daughters, ages 7 and 9, at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas when they were suddenly attacked on a remote trail by a stranger armed with a knife. Witnesses later described the man as having an unsettling death stare before he suddenly launched the assault without warning or provocation. Clinton immediately fought off the attacker to buy time for his family to escape, while Kristen ran the girls to safety and then returned to help her husband. Both parents were fatally stabbed during the struggle. The children were later found uninjured about a half a mile away, having been protected by their parents' final acts of bravery. A 5-day multi-state manhunt later ensued after investigators discovered blood at the scene that didn't belong to either victim. The suspect, 28-year-old teacher Andrew James McGann, was eventually located and arrested at a barbershop in Springdale, Arkansas, where he was in the middle of getting a haircut to alter his appearance. In 2017, Tennessee doctor Paul Locus was celebrating Halloween dressed as the Joker when he got an emergency call that one of his patients was in labor. Still wearing full makeup, green hair, and a purple suit, he rushed straight to the hospital to deliver the baby. The mother later said she couldn't stop laughing as her baby entered the world in the hands of a Batman villain. Here's a photo of a Turkish soldier whose face was severely disfigured by artillery fire during the Battle of Gallipoli in World War I. He likely didn't survive long enough for any meaningful reconstruction to be attempted. In the 1830s, Spanish-born criminal Diogo Alves terrorized Lisbon by robbing travelers on the city's aqueducts and throwing dozens to their deaths below, earning him the nickname the Aqueduct Murderer. After later killing a wealthy family during a botched robbery, he was caught and hanged in 1841. Scientists then severed his head and preserved it in formaldehyde for study, where it still sits on display at the University of Lisbon, eerily intact nearly 2 centuries later. This disturbing footage shows a former University of South Florida PhD chemistry student secretly poisoning his neighbor's home during a dispute over noise. In 2023, Xu Ming Li was caught on a neighbor's security cam repeatedly entering the hallway of their apartment building and injecting liquid opioids into a family's front door and into their doorframe. Soon afterward, the family inside began suffering from unexplained vomiting, severe dizziness, headaches, and breathing problems. Police later determined Li had been targeting them because of an ongoing argument over noise. Investigators said he used his chemistry background to introduce the drugs into their home without them knowing. Li was arrested, expelled from the university, and later deported from the United States. On March 11, 2011, as the Tohoku earthquake struck Japan, 24-year-old city employee Miki Endo stayed at her post broadcasting emergency warnings about the incoming tsunami. Over loudspeakers across the town, she repeatedly urged residents to seek higher ground, continuing even as floodwaters began rushing into the streets and into her building. She refused to leave her position and kept warning the public until the tsunami completely submerged her office building. Miki didn't survive, but her final broadcasts are credited with helping to save thousands of lives. In 2008, 18-year-old Joshua Maddox left his home in Woodland Park, Colorado for a short walk and was never seen again. 7 years later, his mummified body was discovered inside the chimney of an abandoned cabin less than a mile from his house. He was found in a fetal position wearing only a thermal shirt with his other clothes neatly folded nearby. The coroner ruled his death an accident, suggesting he tried to enter the cabin through the chimney and became trapped. But the bizarre details, his position, the missing clothing, and the fact that the chimney was blocked off from the inside have fueled theories that Joshua didn't end up there by accident but was placed there by someone else. In 1930, a mannequin appeared in the window of a bridal shop in Chihuahua, Mexico, so lifelike that locals swore she wasn't made of wax at all. Her glass eyes, detailed hands, and visible veins fueled rumors that she was the embalmed body of the shop owner's daughter, a bride who died on her wedding day. Nicknamed La Pascualita, she's remained on display for nearly a century, still leaving visitors to wonder if they're looking at a mannequin or a corpse in a wedding dress. On June 5, 1986, 24-year-old New York City model Marla Hanson was asked by her landlord Stephen Roth to meet outside a Manhattan bar to collect an $850 security deposit he owed her. As they walked away, Hanson was ambushed by two men Roth had hired. One attacker restrained her head while the other slashed her face with razor blades, carving deep wounds across her cheeks as Roth stood by and watched. The attack required more than 150 stitches, leaving her with permanent disfigurement that effectively ended her modeling career. Hanson survived after extensive reconstructive surgery, and investigators later determined that Roth had ordered the attack after she rejected his romantic advances. He and the two attackers were convicted and sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. Hanson said the trauma continued in court, where a defense attorney subjected her to a vicious and humiliating cross-examination, attacking her credibility, accusing her of manipulating men, and suggested she had falsely identified her attackers due to her being racist, an experience she described as worse than the physical attack itself. Real estate agent Todd Colehep became known as the Amazon Review Killer after investigators uncovered sarcastic product reviews he had posted that referenced his real crimes. For years, he joked about using knives, chains, and shovels while remaining unidentified. In 2016, police traced the disappearance of Kayla Brown to his rural South Carolina property, where she was found alive, chained inside a shipping container after Colehep had already murdered her boyfriend. A search of the land revealed multiple buried bodies, and Colehep later confessed to killing 7 people between 2003 and 2016, including 4 victims in a long cold motorcycle shop massacre. Kim Stanger is a criminal law researcher in Ohio who lives with an extremely rare neurological condition that leaves her with no sense of touch, pain, or temperature. Her peripheral nerves don't transit any sensory signals, meaning she cannot feel injuries, burns, or pressure on her body. Doctors have described her as the only living person documented with a complete loss of somatosensation at this level. As a result, Stanger must visually monitor her body at all times to avoid unknowingly injuring herself, as even severe wounds or extreme temperatures provide no physical warning. Here's a photo of Magda Goebbels with her 6 children, taken sometime before all 6 would be murdered by their own parents as Nazi Germany collapsed. Their father, Joseph Goebbels, wasn't just a high-ranking Nazi, but the architect of the regime's propaganda machine, a man responsible for saturating Germany with anti-Semitic hatred, glorifying mass murder, justifying the Holocaust, and convincing millions that extermination and total war were moral duties. He publicly called for the annihilation of Jews, celebrated civilian deaths, and demanded Germans to fight to extinction rather than surrender, even as cities burned and children starved. As Soviet forces closed in on Berlin in May of 1945, Goebbels remained fanatically loyal to Hitler, retreating with his family into the Führer bunker. There, Magda decided that her children could not live in a world without Nazism, poisoning each of them with cyanide as they slept. Afterward, Joseph and Magda reportedly took their own lives as Berlin fell and the Third Reich collapsed around them. Comedy legend Artie Lang survived one of the most self-destructive spirals in modern celebrity. In January of 2010, after years of severe heroin addiction, he stabbed himself multiple times in the abdomen inside his Hoboken apartment, collapsing from internal bleeding and barely surviving emergency surgery. His addiction later led to overdoses, constant arrests, homelessness, and the collapse of his nasal septum as a result of long-term cocaine abuse, permanently disfiguring his face. Thankfully, in recent years, Lang has said he's sober, lives mostly out of the spotlight, and prioritizes stability and health over returning to fame. In 2007, Shelly Miscavige, the wife of Scientology leader David Miscavige and once one of the organization's most powerful figures, attended her father's funeral and then completely vanished from public view. She's not been seen, photographed, or heard from publicly ever since. In 2013, actress and Scientology defector Leah Remini filed a missing persons report, prompting the LAPD to state they had located Shelly and confirmed she was alive and safe, though no evidence, images, or details were released, and no independent verification has ever occurred. Former Scientology members allege she was removed from leadership and confined to a secret church facility due to internal conflicts with David, claims which the organization vehemently denies, leaving her disappearance unresolved nearly 2 decades later.